Okay, just taking a look at this file, you want to, when you go through your images, always go through the levels down at the layers. You can create a layer for levels, and it makes it a little bit easier because when you take a look, depending on how you ink this in, it has a light and dark to it, even though it was using this ink part to it. So again, you can adjust the amount of pixels that are black or minimal. So as you bring this up, you can see how quickly it darkens those files together. Brings the texture of the paper through the scan. So I can eliminate some of that just by moving this light slider over, and makes this pixel the brightest color. The mid section, kind of went before on this, lets it go either a lighter side or to the darker side. So depending on which one, as you adjust this, you'll start to see how crisp or connected you want those lines to be. So it's taking the midtones. And you can still adjust this as you go through, trying to make this even dark as possible just to get the line. Sometimes you may want to have it so that it's kind of cleaned off there, but that gives you that section. And this on and off piece, you can kind of see where it's happening. This layer, I may want to take some of these smudges off that I made, and you can see it's not as clean of a line as the Illustrator line, so it's trying to show you the difference between the two to try to help you out. This part, I can also put in a layer mask on this layer and then bring in the brush. Now the brush, I'm just going to make a hard-edged brush so it shows up, and you can kind of see it cutting across. The opacity was at 40, so just raise that, and this takes that section right away. So as it takes it away, depending on the foreground background color, it'll bring it back as well, so you're not eliminating it all on a layer mask. But as a background layer, just fill it so you have a white background to it. And you can merge these layers together. So this is just the section that shows this part onto that piece, and just hit X to bring this part back. So depending on how close you take it, you can always make these into selections. Make this into a smaller piece here. You can click and hold the shift key, it makes it a straight line. And depending on how far you want to take anything, any mistakes that you think you made, that you can always clean up in Photoshop. But that's just kind of setting the piece together. So I have a levels layer. I can right click and disable this because that's just showing this piece, and then this is the background showing a white layer. Okay, so just kind of giving you those options as you go through your design. And then you can create that part and kind of build it up on top using a color layer, but that's just setting it for this piece. The other part is that now when I put a color layer above this, and just put color, as I go through this part, depending on how I want to use the brush, sometimes you can just use the local color as you start to build up your illustration. And the color scheme, again, we'll go over that. But just to show you that this is just a solid brush color, and you can see it painting right over the top. That's the top layer, and I can always change the mode to multiply that lets the bottom layer show through. So you can kind of paint just like you would a section. Sometimes I'm overlapping if you want to try to select a piece, just kind of doing it this way first. And you can always toggle between both the eraser tool, again choosing a hard-edged brush for that, so I can treat it almost just like a coloring book as one way to do it, and building it up that way. So that gives you a little bit of color between the two. So if I go between the brush to paint it and E for eraser to take it out, that's a quick way to kind of set something up. Okay. The other option is to take what we've done with the Magic Wand tool, and as you click inside of a piece, you have to take a look at selecting everything. If I use a color just to show you, it highlighted all of that part. So the top pieces has contiguous, which is selecting right next to itself the pixel, and then the sample all layers allows me to go through the top layer all the way to the bottom. So that's giving you this part. So this is also a quick way. The only tricky part is when you end up with a section that has a hole in it. We'll try to, so this part's not too bad. So I've kind of combined them a little bit. So this part I may have wanted to color that separately, but I can always come back and change that and fill that up pretty easily. So Option Delete is filling all this part in there. So as long as it's sometimes easiest, just like in the drawing, to establish one color and then go back and start to manipulate all the other colors. So that's kind of doing that piece. This part that's selected, I can just simply take out and delete that. So I kind of have the basic sections, and the Shift key allows you to change that piece. So there's that pretty much blocked in there. So this is the color. This is the layer that it's kind of over the top of, so you can see where I painted right over it as opposed to the magic wand tool connecting it. And why this is highlighted, I can lock the pixels and then start to use the brush to either paint within that. So if I take the color, this is the local color, I can get a darker value, for example, and here's the opacity, and start to paint that. I'm going to go for a softer edge brush. That gives me that. The opacity is at 50, and now you can kind of see it going off, and it's the pixel layer is locked, so it's just doing that first part. And again, this is a section now. This is all on the same layer, so sometimes it's nice to actually put that tone, the second tone layer, on a separate part. So now when I illustrate this, you can see it's going over the edge, but I can clip the path right here, so now it's just doing that coloring, and it stays just within the brown that's on the base layer. Okay, so like I said, there's ways I'll show you in a second about different color pieces. This part I'm going to probably take off. So I can just deselect that, take the magic wand tool, and just delete that part of there. So it's kind of building up the color as you see it. Down here where this tree limb that he's resting on is kind of off, the center part's in there, but the rest of it is missing. So when I go to fill that color, you can see it fills there, but when I come over to here, it fills the whole background. So I have to put in another layer here that's going to be just a little bit enough to give me a little bit of a line that I can temporarily close it if I don't really want it closed, and then use the magic wand to select that part. And lets me fill that part there. And then this layer I can just hide. So now at least I've used it to help me get the coloring in there. So see how you do on that one. So right now this is just Illustrator, just a file opened up, and went into the color chart and brought open the editing color wheel and showed this to you, that this gives you an option where you can take a look at the different color schemes that are here, and a complementary or split complementary will give you the colors on the opposite side. When you change the saturation of the color, it goes all the way to the perimeter of the board, but this will give you some range of colors that you can choose from. So for example, if you take an idea like this, I have these colors and I also have the color guide brought up over here, and I could take these and use them into Photoshop, so it's almost like using a palette. And however, once you close out of Illustrator, you're done, but you can make a screen capture on this part and just connect all these pieces that are here, for example, and that'll give you a section. So here I am back in this drawing, and I can go to File, Place Embedded, and the screen captures are right on the desktop of the computer when you take them, depending on how much space you have on your desktop there. So let's see, here's the piece that I have. So I can open this up and it'll place it right in the document. Click OK. And this kind of gives me a little bit of a color choice that, you know, may not have had before, but at least it gives you some idea. So I can take the eyedrop color and maybe pick this blue. When I go into my swatches, I can take a look if I want to try to keep a separate section. For example, I can build up a color palette, and that'll let me add to the pieces that I have here. So I can kind of pick through them, places them right at the bottom, illustrating that part, at least giving me that piece. And then all these tints and tones, whether I want to pick them right from this color bar is possible, but I can always just grab those as I'm painting this part. So that'll give me that section. So again, just kind of grabbing whether it's that particular color, and I can just click here, add to the swatches, and it puts it right below it as it goes through. It gives me that section. So then this layer I can just hide, but then beneath this, again, I can use the magic wand tool or just a brush, a larger brush, to take those colors and start to use them into this painting of the Photoshop file. And again, the hard edge brush is kind of nice just to get the image started as you're going through this part, depending on the opacity level. And sometimes you may want to use the magic wand tool, sometimes you just want to paint right on it. And again, when you click on this, it gives you all the color choices right around there for you to pick from. So it's kind of a nice idea for that part. So it gives you that section. There it is, painting right on top of it. But again, depending on the color palette that you have, you know, this is letting it go through that section. And it has a little bit of the tone on top of it. Okay, so that's just this section that I have not colored yet. And if I want to use the magic wand, I can select and shift key these pieces and just fill them with that color. Here it just has a little bit of the tone coming over the top of it. So it's a quick way to start to illustrate it. And again, these tones, like I said, these are kind of a clipping mask right in here just by the option and taking that. If I take it off, you see it goes to the outside edge. And this is just a quick way to kind of, and you can always connect them later, bring them together, but that gives you this at least top piece section.